think that the universe speaks in mathematics, and in many ways, spirituality is a type of math. I talk about the bad math. We think that in order to achieve our goals, our dreams, and our desires, we have to hustle and grind to get the desired result. Or in order to achieve our desires, we have to have the perfect plan. That works out well for a while until perfectionism builds up so much momentum that it starts to suffocate us.
Our guest today, David Bayer, he's an author, speaker, and leading expert on human evolution, entrepreneurship, and global matters. And after graduating from Columbia University with a degree in philosophy and comparative literature, Bayer went on to create a prolific career in business, eventually becoming CEO of David Bayer Coaching and an Inc. number 171 fastest growing transformational company. And after a decade-long battle with drug, alcohol, and pornography addiction, Bayer found recovery and went on to immerse himself in study across the fields of human potential, neuroscience, consciousness theory, behavioral psychology, wisdom teachings, emergent healing technologies, biohacking, and metaphysics in search of a way to go beyond self-help and actually change his mind. And today, his methodologies have touched millions of lives, and they're considered a breakthrough in personal growth and a solution for addressing the world's greatest challenges. David's book, A Changed Mind, explains how latent fear held in the nervous system and expressed through thoughts, emotions, and actions really is the source of all suffering, both in our individual lives and in the world. And his annual event, the Powerful Living Experience Live, was named a top 3 must-attend personal development events by Inc. magazine. And his podcast, A Changed Mind, dives deep into personal growth and how to apply the scientific principles of human behavior to address the most important issues in our individual lives and the world. You can learn more about David's work at davidbayer.com. So I know you guys tuning in, you love detoxification, you love your health and anti-aging, and that's why you're listening to this podcast. And I'm so proud about a new docuseries that I produced called Heavy. And you can learn more about that at theheavymovie.com. And this is a series that's all about how toxins are causing the obesity epidemic, the diabetes epidemic, chronic fatigue, digestive issues, hormone issues, sex, stress, and thyroid hormones, digestive issues, and even how emotional trauma is contributing to weight gain as well. And also, more importantly, how to go about detoxing your body using all the latest detox breakthroughs that I've learned over the past, 10, 15 years. So I really encourage anyone that is looking to do a deep dive on really what toxins are doing to our body to go check that out at theheavymovie.com. There's 9 episodes. There are 107 detox experts that I interviewed for this series. It's been such a labor of love, and I know that you're going to love it too. So I can't wait for you to see it. And now a word from one of our sponsors. So imagine a world where we don't actually fight cancer. We just tell our bodies to stop growing it. Sounds groundbreaking, right? Dr. Dana Flavin, who's a world-renowned cancer specialist for over 40 years, warns we are swimming in toxins. They're in our daily products, our food, water, and air. The real danger? These toxins signal our body to grow cancer. That's why I urge you to join Dr. Flavin and Nathan Crean, an award-winning health researcher, in an eye-opening web class. They'll reveal the 9 key toxins that could be triggering cancer in your body, and most importantly, how to eliminate them. Don't just fight cancer, go right to its root cause. So join me by going to conqueringcancer.com/Wendy Myers, MYERS, now to register for this free web class. It's so important. Again, that's conqueringcancer.com/Wendy Myers. Make the change today. David, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the transformation work that you're doing today?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Well, my story started in addiction recovery. So in 2006, I started what was my second business at that time. and it was a venture-backed technology company. I didn't realize at that time, but like so much of what I was doing was chasing success and to feel good about myself. And so in 2010, I realized my life had become unmanageable, and I started working on a recovery program. So, in recovery, I found sort of the first phase of my spiritual connection. We have a higher power is a very important part of addiction recovery. And I just started becoming more self-aware, like really getting to the root cause of my addictive behavior. And I became curious about what was possible in terms of change. So that led me into personal growth, where, I started reading all the books, I started going to the events, and then I just went down a rabbit trail. So, my story took me to India, studying in ashrams with my wife, who was my girlfriend at that time, getting into metaphysics and neuroscience and behavioral psychology, and really just starting to understand how reality works and how we interface with it. And so I had experienced my own really deep suffering and became passionate about helping other people. And as I was going through learning, and at one point I got stuck in personal growth too. It was like I understood all the concepts, but I was having a hard time integrating and embodying and really healing the deeper traumas. And so in my desire to find more full healing for myself, I learned a thing or two. And my wife was seeing how I was coaching and helping some of my friends, and she said, you should do a workshop. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm not going to
Yeah,
go
don't do it
teach
for your
this.
friends for free. No.
I was like, I'm not going to go
Help other
teach
people.
this stuff. I'd been building internet businesses for 20 years. I didn't see myself as like a teacher or a healer or a coach. And
We all start
but
with
I
our
did.
friends, right?
Yeah,
We
I
should start
guess.
helping them.
Yeah, that was, I just put together a one-day workshop, sharing what I had learned up until that point. And there were some people who were in there. There's friends and friends of friends, and some folks who had been doing personal development for a long time. And they said, hey, this is really different. This is really, this one day you put together transformed my life. And so then we decided to pursue it as a mission. And so that's how we got to the work that we're doing now.
Okay, fantastic. And so you say that, everything that you experience in your life is based on what you believe and you think. That's very much true. I very much believe in the power of your thoughts. What you think, what you say, that's what's going to happen. So can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people get that at some level, right? It's like the idea of the secret of the law of attraction, but it's not woo at all. If you understand how behavioral psychology works, it tells you that all of your thoughts are derived from your core belief systems, like the meanings that you gave, the experiences of your life, that you gave the experiences of relationships, yourself, money, everything. Literally started forming the neural network structure of your brain. And so now as an adult, you really only have access to thoughts that are congruent with those beliefs. And so if you believe money is hard to make, you're not going to have thoughts that are going to lead to making money easily. If you, have beliefs that you're going to, people betray your trust, you're not going to have trust thoughts around, forging trusted relationships. And whatever you think on a moment by moment basis, that thought becomes an emotional activation in your nervous system. And then those emotions are exclusively what drive our behaviors. So all of our behaviors are preceded by an emotion, and then our behaviors determine our results. And sort of the reason why so many people get stuck is because they then produce results that reaffirm the belief they started with, but they think the result is actually the cause for the belief, right? Oh, see, I know things don't work out for me. Money's hard to make. You can't trust people. But really it's the belief that started it. So that's how thoughts become things. And that's really the internal mechanism of how a thought becomes a thing. Whatever you believe, you think, what you think, you feel, what you feel, you do, what you do is the result, and the result reinforces itself. But there's also this external mechanism, which is everything that I just explained is an electrical phenomenon in your body. And so we're radioactive. So we produce electricity, we produce vibration, and that vibration has a communication matrix in our reality, which has a lot of names. You could call it consciousness or intelligence or God or the universe or whatever. And it's connecting every individual expression of intelligence or spirit. So other people being influenced at an unconscious level to create coincidences and synchronicities in your life. And that's why, when you're faithful that things are going to work out, they do. And when you have fears, your worst fears become realized. So if we want to create any kind of change in our businesses, in our lives, in our bodies, in our relationships, in our bank accounts, we need to observe what's happening externally, but realize that it originated internally, and work at an internal level. That's what affects change on an external level. And it's universal. In other words, there's no exception to this. So, whether we're having conversations with people around how to heal, or whether we're having conversations with entrepreneurs around how to grow their businesses, the challenging experience you have right now is a reflection of your consciousness. And so it gives us an opportunity to do the inner work, and we change our external environment.
Yes. And so I think a lot of people, they have challenges with figuring out what their beliefs are, regulating their emotions, trying to like improve maybe the center point of their emotions, being more positive than negative. But a lot of those things come from our traumas. It's hard to kind of just think your way out of that. Is that part of the core work that you do with people, is kind of working on their traumas so that they're able to kind of work on their mindset?
Yeah. So it's a multifaceted approach. In fact, we sort of look at internal resistance in layers, and the first layer can really be approached cognitively. It's you can work with your beliefs on an intellectual level, and the work that we do is not so much trying to convince you to believe something else based on what we tell someone, but to really source experiences from their own life that are memories that are dormant because they don't support the hypothesis of the predominant belief, but they're there. And so we help people source from their own life new belief systems by reactivating those memories. And as equally important is to find evidence to disbelieve, right, the limiting belief. And so we have a really cool process called the decision matrix. It's really, really simple, which is when someone becomes aware of a limiting belief, or any belief that doesn't serve them well, it's not congruent with what they're trying to create, that they identify it, and then they establish a new decision, which is some form of the opposite of the limiting belief. And then a really simple third step, which is, what evidence do you have for the fact that this new decision is true? And it's really incredible. Like, without fail, as long as someone is willing to be patient with the process, they'll start to uncover evidence after evidence after evidence after evidence. And really what you're doing is you're awakening parts of your brain that your brain, for all practical purposes, didn't find use for, but you find useful because they help show you that, in fact, the limiting belief is untrue, and the new decision is more true. And so that's the beginning of the work. And then what we found is a lot of people want to let go of limiting beliefs, but they're tied to resentments. And so it's almost impossible, for example, to let go of this feeling that, you're not good enough if you got that from an experience with one of your parents and you hold a resentment towards the parent. So resentments is not a common kind of inventory in personal growth, but because of my background in recovery, I became aware of how critical it was in the healing process. And then knowledge and understanding is important because, if you understand that there's what we believe is there's a loving, intelligent design to life, and that the experiences that you had when you were younger that we might call trauma, were actually part of the process of your development, which was required for your own hero's journey. And you can start to let go of some of the stories like, this shouldn't have happened. It's like, well, no, it should have happened because it did happen, right? Or sometimes in cases where we suffer abuse, when we create a story about ourselves and what it means, versus, no, that was actually just someone who had their own trauma and didn't know how to process it, so they passed it on to someone else. We can start to really alleviate ourselves of some of those deeper wounds. So, and then it builds and it builds and it builds. Ultimately, what this takes most people to is some sort of spiritual belief. Like, as people tend to do healing work, they become more spiritual, which makes sense, because that intuitive relationship with yourself and with whatever greater part of us might exist is covered up by all of these programs and limiting beliefs and childhood traumas. And so as we start to strip some of those away, people tend to become, just trust that there's something guiding them in their life, and they're able to look backwards and go, hey, something must have been guiding me there too. And so in that, we start to relax, because the trauma is a habit of a sympathetic reaction. And so what we're trying to do is, build an intellectual case and build an emotional habit of downregulating the nervous system. And then as we do that, it's like doing reps at the gym. Every time you don't entangle with that habit of emotional psychological response that the trauma has been inducing, it becomes separated, and less entangled.
Yeah, and I definitely can identify with everything you're saying as an entrepreneur myself, and probably a lot of entrepreneurs listening, is that there's a lot of people that have trauma and they get into this doing mode, into their masculine, into perfectionism, and just working, or, this workaholism. And that can be a result of trauma, but that's a beautiful gift also, because it propels us to move forward and, push for perfectionism and help other people. And but it's so true, like in my own journey of healing and the healing trauma, have found God and spirituality, a source, whatever you'd like to call it, and I have every morning where I say what it is that I'm wanting, what it is that I'm wanting to create, even like just crazy goals. Because I feel like even though that they're very lofty goals, somehow the universe is going to help guide me to those. I might not know the exact path, or it might be kind of a crazy path, difficult path, but I personally believe that I will eventually reach those goals. So can you talk about your process, like how you teach people to kind of like with manifesting or working with their intuition on that level?
Yeah, I mean, the first part is starting out with what you just said, which is a belief that that's how it works. We I'm I tend to speak in mathematics. I think that the universe speaks in mathematics, and in many ways, like spirituality is a type of math. And so I talk about the bad math. The bad math was, we think that in order to achieve our goals, our dreams, and our desires, we have to hustle and grind to get the desired result. Or in order to achieve our desires, we have to have the perfect plan, like you talked about. That works out well for a while until perfectionism builds up so much momentum that it starts to suffocate us, which usually happens between the ages of 35 and 55. It's like the pattern just gains too much momentum and starts over applying itself. Or desire plus meeting the perfect person to bring your work to the world, the perfect partner, equals desired result. But what we found is really the equation is desire plus non-resistance equals desired result. Our job as human beings is to have a vision and have goals and have dreams. And if we can eliminate the resistance within us in the forms of limiting beliefs, misunderstandings, childhood traumas, the human being by design is meant to bring into the world whatever the desire is. Like, just as fish are designed to swim and birds are designed to fly, the human being is designed to materialize desire through the mechanism of thought, emotion, and action, and through the mechanism of vibration, like we talked about, internally and externally. And so it really changes the game for people, because now your job isn't to try to figure anything out. The figuring out is a natural byproduct of non-resistance, right? When you're
It's like
non-resistant,
allowing,
you
not being
have the
attached
thoughts,
to
you
the
have the
outcome.
ideas. And I think where people become resistant to that idea is they think that what I would be suggesting is that you don't have to take action. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that action becomes a natural, joyful, inspired byproduct of non-resistance versus procrastination, self-sabotage, or, as you pointed out, taking a lot of action, but doing it from a hustle or grind. And so the first thing is to at least understand how the game of life works, right? And then once you understand how it works, then there are those two pieces. Some people have gone without desire for so long that they've, the desire muscle has atrophied. So we have to reactivate it. And then the other part of the equation is the non-resistance part. So, like, what is the resistance? How do we identify the resistance? And how do we let go of the resistance? And then it becomes a daily practice. And so that's, of course, we've got a lot of different tools and frameworks, and really an amazing community too of people who are living in this practice, doing it imperfectly, because we always find ourselves in some form of resistance. There's always something new that shows up, or a deeper layer of integration that, life is calling us towards. But But it's pretty amazing when you surround yourself with people like yourself who decide to have big visions and big goals and big dreams, and who are actually doing the work that is the only work really to be done, which is use the arena of business or life as a reflection for that which needs to be healed, and work and do the work. The results are the byproduct of doing the work.
Yes, yes. I'm thrilled to announce my new docu-series come out called Heavy. And you can learn more about it at theheavymovie.com and sign up for free. It's a totally free event. And in this landmark series, I interviewed 100 experts on the subject of detoxification, on the subject of toxins, and how these inescapable toxins in our environment are causing our chronic health issues like brain fog, dementia, chronic fatigue, mitochondrial dysfunction, obesity, resistant weight loss, even diabetes. Our diabetes epidemic is caused by toxins. It's not just the food that you're eating. And we also talk about, how toxins interfere in digestion, how toxins are aging you. So many important topics are going to be covered on the Heavy docu-series. So again, go check it out at theheavymovie.com. And so
Yeah.
and you have an event coming up, correct? For entrepreneurs and, anyone seeking to improve their life. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, we do an event once a year. It's called the Powerful Living Experience Live. This will be our 5th year doing it live. And this year we'll have about 500 impact-driven entrepreneurs who come to the event. And it's an opportunity for them to really do the deep work, the inner work. We spend about 30% of the time on business strategies because the strategies are important. But ultimately, the execution of the strategies is an effective mindset. And so it's 3.5 days of taking a very holistic, integrated approach at both your business, your life, you, and as we talked about, getting really, really clear on what the vision is, and then being able to work through our teachings and our processes to identify and transform the resistance that's there. And then that way, you're free to be able to, joyfully build your business. And we get all kinds of people at the event. Some people are just looking to start their own business. Some people are running 7, 8, 9-figure businesses. But what they brought into their, profitable, quote unquote, successful business is a lot of the unprocessed, trauma and resistance. And, that's as equally challenging, if not more challenging than, trying to get your business to the next level of scale. Because now you've got a larger, constellation within which your resistance is playing out. So,
Yeah. And what is the website for that event?
yeah, www.powerfullivingexperience.com. That's coming up. Yeah, that's in Round Rock, Texas this year, 2024, February 22nd through the 25th.
And so what are some of the things that people maybe can expect, like coming out of that event?
Consistently, what I see is that people tap into a larger vision than they had, no matter how big their vision is. And I think part of that is being in an environment with 500 people who are all looking to make a real difference in the world through their businesses, learning the tools in order to transform resistance and be in a practice of down-regulating your nervous system.
Yeah, I think that's so important, is having a bigger vision, because
Yeah,
you're only going to rise to the level of your vision, or to the level of
yeah,
your goals, or what you're asking for in the universe. And I had to learn that the hard way. I was setting like little 1-year goals, or just like little, because I didn't believe that I could maybe achieve certain huge goals. And it just wasn't maybe in my, just wasn't in my belief system, like, oh, that could never happen. And it took a long time to kind of let that go and have bigger goals, just set larger
yeah.
ones.
To your point, it's you can't expand your life beyond your own self-perception. Your perception of yourself, what you believe to be possible is going to be the limit of your life. And so as you start to really understand that we're connected to something greater, and that the work is not, needing to have a certain amount of financial resources or health resources or intelligence or the size of your team, like none of those things actually matter, that you truly do just get to decide, you get to have a vision and you get to dream. And that as long as your thoughts and your beliefs are in alignment with the outcomes that you desire to produce, 100% mechanically, predictably, you'll produce those results. I think that understanding allows people to start dreaming bigger. Of course, we take people through processes to help them expand their vision. And it also helps to have the business strategies, because that can start to shape the picture as well. It's like Carol's my wife, we started this business in 2016 and we generated over $30 million over the last 7 years, but we weren't marketers or salespeople when we started this business. And so we got on the entrepreneur's merry-go-round. We went from course to course and coaching program to coaching program and worked with a lot of well-meaning people. But it wasn't until we sort of saw all the different pieces and we figured out a way to put them together so that we could get our message out to the world that we really, truly found success. And so a lot of what we share over the course of the event are the strategies we used, the mindset tools we used, the processes that we used in order to, it's the name of the event, right? In order to have a powerful living experience.
Yeah. And it's amazing, I think, when you tap into source or God and you start asking for help and asking for resources and tapping into kind of what's your birthright is just
your birthright's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Or your guidance that you need, and ask for things, tools and people you need to achieve certain things. It's amazing what starts happening and unfolding.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think that you can't really be good at anything if you don't understand the underlying principles that govern success and whatever you're trying to achieve. The reason why I achieved sobriety in my recovery program was because there were steps. There was a process, there were steps. I was in a community with other people who were wanting to achieve sobriety. Most people don't have steps that are designed to produce consistent results in their life. As I mentioned before, we think it's hustle and grind or some form of limitation, or in order to be successful, I have to sacrifice certain things. When you really understand the metaphysical principles that are governing, creation and how anything is created, and you can align yourself with those things, then you can dream bigger and you can actually achieve the results without having to sacrifice. Again, that's not to say that we don't work, quote unquote, hard. There's a certain amount of time and energy that has to be put in. But that's different than operating with resistance while you're trying to create something.
Yeah, I definitely identify with that. And it's just like beating yourself up, working 14 hours a day and pushing. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs or people wanting to be entrepreneurs really feel like they're never doing enough. They should be doing more. They should be, having a business and working out and meditating and, do all these different things to take care of themselves for their health. But they're too busy with their business or their lives to actually kind of do these things of self-care that would benefit them. Like, so how do you teach people to handle this?
I think we misunderstand our relationship with time. And so, when I first got into recovery, the therapist I was working with said, listen, you're going to go to 3 meetings a week. You're going to come to a therapy session once a week. You're going to come to the men's group that I host once a week, and you're going to make 3 phone calls to other people in the program and check in how you're feeling and how you're doing on a daily basis. And all of these meetings were about 30 to 45 minutes from my home. And I was like, there's no way, there's not enough time in the day. But I reprioritized my recovery. And what I actually found was that my life reorganized around it. And, Gandhi has this adage where he says, I have so much to do today, I must meditate for 2 hours instead of 1. And at first glance, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, most of us have too much to do today, so we don't meditate at all. But I think Gandhi understood a principle, which is whatever you decide is important in your life will create efficiencies in order for you to be able to do those things. In other words, your life right now consists of a variety of tasks that we do on a weekly basis. And we look at the amount of time each task takes, and then we go, well, there you go, 40 to 50 hours, right? That's it. And I have to do these things. I need to get these things done. Could be in your business, could be in your life. And so we say, well, I can't insert anything else into my schedule. So once I get done with these things, then I'll do these other things. And oftentimes these other things are like spending time with your family, going for a walk, exercising, meditating, self-care, whatever it is. But the truth is that if we actually decide that we're going to do one of these other things or some of these other things, there's a recalibration in your life you start thinking differently. You start perceiving the tasks that you're accomplishing differently. Different resources and support show up. In other words, on a moment by moment basis, life is completely reorganizing according to what you've decided is important to you. And most of us are operating with a pretty significant baseline inefficiency in the way that things are going, right? Like what's happening right now in your business is just one possibility of the way it could be working. And so we focus so much on time, number one, not realizing that it's not fixed. The brain will pretend that it's fixed. The brain will go, no, I know it happened last week and I know it has to be done this week and I know how to add that up. There's no time. And then you say, no, actually time is not important. I'm going to do this thing in addition to everything else. And then what begins to reorchestrate is this thing called timing. So timing changes and you can't outwork timing, So I think oftentimes we adhere to the reality in front of us as if it's fixed, rather than understanding that the reality that we're experiencing is simply a reflection of what we've been deciding before, and that it can change. So, and I experienced that when I had, I have a 1.5-year-old son. And so, my whole business reorganized as a result of it. And so, yeah, of course, we're doing things differently, but we're still striving towards the same outcomes. And I oftentimes think like, thank God he arrived, because the way that we were doing the business before wasn't sustainable physically, emotionally, spiritually. As I mentioned to you, we grew very, very quickly. And so, he's forced an efficiency in our business. And so I'm experiencing it, firsthand.
Yeah. And I think, that we all have things that show up in our life, that we have to make changes, for us to make beautiful changes and room for time for a child or other things that happen. And I think the concept of time is challenging, because I think so many people are in that state of overwhelm, of fear. They can't get enough done. There's not enough time in the day, and they keep telling themselves these stories, and that pushes them to entrepreneurs to work 12 and 14 and even 16 hours a day. And the reality is you have so much time. There's so much time to get things done. It's just your kind of self-talk about it, I believe. And,
Yes.
and when you look back at what you've done in the last 5 years, you've accomplished so much. All of us have accomplished so many things, and think on the scale of like 25 years from now, how much you're going to accomplish. But, the work's always there. It's not going anywhere. There's always going to be more work, and you have to take time for self-care, breaks, your family, etc., because it's more valuable, honestly, your relationship with yourself and your family.
And the stress and the overwhelm is actually the problem. So the problem is that we're trying to create from fight or flight. Like we're trying to create from within the sympathetic activation of the nervous system. And that's not where creation comes from. That's not where the power of the human being is, right? That's the old model of the human being. That's the reactive, not the creative human being. And so, when we're working with entrepreneurs, a lot of times they'll say, well, my problem is like, I don't have enough leads, or my problem is I'm not generating enough customers, or my problem is my cash flow. And we're like, no, your problem is your anxiety. Your problem is your overwhelm. And so we can take a look at the beliefs that are creating the overwhelm, to your point, like the belief that I'm not as far along as I should be, or I need to be doing more, or there's not enough time in the day. And we can establish some new beliefs and really help someone reorient themselves to those new beliefs or those new decisions. But that's the real problem. We talk about it as an inner conflict. Almost always when someone says, my issue is this thing, the issue is not that thing. The issue is the reaction that's coming up as a result of that thing. That reaction is moving you into what we would call a primal state. And that's where you can't be inefficient. That's where disease is, right? That's where, I wouldn't call it poverty, right? But like not having prosperity and abundance is. That's where business inefficiency is. And so again, it's like, okay, so if what we're saying is that the thing that is diminishing my possibilities of success is my resistance or these resistant emotions, then the work is to actually transform that resistance. Right. But that's not how we work as entrepreneurs. Like, we don't wake up and go, all right, let me check in with myself. I have all these goals. What's my resistance to these goals? Let me transform the resistance. Then boom, we're off to our day, but that really should be the first thing that we do in the morning if we want to create extraordinary results. And then over time, you don't have to do that work on a continual basis, right? I mean, you develop a new habit of trusting and relaxing and believing, and it becomes second nature.
Yeah, and it takes time. It takes time
And
to
it
kind
takes
of
time.
flip that script and go from that fear and lack and whatnot to joy and love and gratitude and appreciating the work, or being thankful for where you are and what you're going to achieve in the future.
Yeah, and I've been sharing with our community a lot too. Like in early 2022, I was back in it. Our business went through a pivot. Baby was on the way. Carol was pregnant. There were a lot of challenges, and I went through another chapter of a long, dark night of the soul. I work with my anxiety on a daily basis. I didn't really wake up one day and go, hey, I'd like to do events and speak for 3 days in front of 1,000 people. Like that. That wasn't a desire of mine. And
Yeah,
so
never thought you'd be there. I never thought I'd have 500 podcast episodes, when I
that's
first started
amazing.
this either,
Yeah. I don't think it's about, like, at least for me, it's not so much, hey, I don't stress, or I don't get overwhelmed, or I don't worry. I certainly on average do it far less than I used to, but it's about having the tools to actually work with what comes up and to actually know that that's the work to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I identify with that too. I
Yeah.
still have stress and fear, and I have to just talk my way out of it and then ask God to help you find your life purpose, step more into your life purpose, and work through you to help other people. And I think that's
Yeah.
kind of and doing it with love. That's kind of the overriding, point. But why don't you tell us, like I talk to a lot of experts on different ways to, improve their health, detoxification, et cetera, helping with their brain health. So how do you think that mindset plays a role in the healing process and the things that people tell themselves about their health? What do you teach in your work?
Yeah. I did an episode recently on our podcast on anxiety, and also did one on the chronic disease loop. And, my own experience was, I believe all symptomatology is really your body's method of coping with the dissonance in your system. It's like, that's why we have a fever when we get sick. It's a signal of health is coming, right? And so anxiety, for example, is your body's way of addressing the accumulation of dissonant stress-based energy. That's what anxiety is. We don't have a mechanism like animals do, where they get into a fight and so they end up flapping their wings or rolling around on the ground. Or, I mean, we certainly can. You actually can see children, how they express themselves emotionally very freely, but we become emotionally constipated. And so our belief and my own experience is that anxiety is the mechanism of alleviating ourselves of that accumulated stress and tension. The challenge is, a lot of what we've done in Western medicine is that we've vilified symptomatology. But if what we're saying is actually symptomatology is the healing process, then what we're doing now is we're, suffocating the healing process. We're essentially putting a lid on top of boiling water. And I think that's why we see, so much occurring right now in terms of the proliferation of autoimmune disease, inflammatory disease, cancering. And so I think the first part is education. I had a teacher who was a healer in indigenous healing technologies in Costa Rica, and he'd been a healer for like 30 years. And one of his sayings was, what's coming is going. And so allow it to go. And I think no longer making anxiety, for example, the enemy, like that there's something wrong with me, but understanding that it's a mechanism for healing immediately allows someone to relax, even though the feeling may still be uncomfortable. The problem is, not only are we suppressing symptomatology, which is the healing process, but because no one's educated us on the fact that it is a healing process, we become afraid of our own bodies. And so now you get in a tension loop. Now you're afraid of your own anxiety. You're afraid of your own autoimmune disease. You're afraid of your chronic pain. And you can see, I think I mean, the CDC's list of stress-related diseases is like everything that's out there, right? Everything from arthritis to headaches to brain fog to neuropathy to, to gastrointestinal problems. The list is pretty much anything you might think you could ever possibly experience is a stress-related disease. And so I think the important thing is to begin to educate people, or for people to understand that, your body's not your enemy, because it's impossible to get into, very difficult, let's say, to get into a healing state when you're afraid of your own bodily experience. And I think that's what happens with a lot of these kind of chronic loops that people get into.
What you tell yourself about your symptoms is also really important. So many people are dealing with like health PTSD. They start having like anxiety when they have certain symptoms, or here we go again. So why don't you tell us about your book, A Changed Mind, and what people can expect from that?
Yeah, so a changed mind is really the codification of everything that I learned in my own journey, and an integration of all of the teachings from neuroscience to metaphysics to wisdom teachings to behavioral psychology to really help us understand how life works and the game that we should be playing, as well as like how we function as human beings in the human being operating system. So it's my take on personal growth, what I would call 2.0. And how to not only become more self-aware, because that's the first step, but how we can actually rewire our brains. And as we do that, re-engineer our reality, because everything that's happening externally is just a reflection of our habit of thought, our habit of emotion, our habit of vibration. And, you had asked a question earlier, or didn't really ask a question, but you said, people need to become more self-aware. How do they become more self-aware? And when you understand how the game works and you realize that you're creating every experience in your reality, not in some sort of, new age woo-woo sort of way, but like it's a very practical understanding that we're creating the experiences of our life. Then when we have experiences that we don't prefer, we can pay attention to our reaction to the experiences. That immediate thought that you have, that reaction, that inner argument, that outer accusation, the inner critic, that's actually the habit of thought or the belief system that created the experience itself. So it's not an effect of the experience, it's actually the cause of the experience. And now we've got the material that allows us to create transformation, and we can work with that material, and we've got just a ton of tools and frameworks in A Changed Mind to help people do that.
Okay, fantastic. And yeah, so everyone can learn more about your work at davidbayer.com. Certainly learn about your book and your live event in Austin here in February. Again, why don't you tell us, where we can learn more about your work, your social media, it's YouTube, et cetera.
Yeah, sure. We've got the podcast is A Changed Mind as well, same name as the book. That's on Spotify and iTunes. We put all the full episodes on our YouTube channel as well. You can just YouTube David Bayer. And then I put clips on our Instagram, David Bayer 33, and our Facebook page. So lots of ways to stay in touch with us. Come and join us at the event in February. Again, powerfullivingexperience.com, or we've got a bunch of goodies and free downloads and trainings, as well as my ebook over at davidbayer.com.
Okay, fantastic. Well, David, thanks so much for joining us on the Myers Detox podcast. And everyone, thanks so much for listening and tuning in every week. It's just such a pleasure to be able to serve you and to have all these experts from around the world helping you to kind of up-level your health through, like today, mindset, anti-aging, detoxification, et cetera. So thanks so much for tuning in.
Thanks, Wendy.
The Myers Detox podcast is created and hosted by Wendy Myers. This podcast is for information purposes only. Statements and views expressed on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Wendy Myers and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.